recorded and streamed live. I'd like everybody to make sure that they have their mobile telephones switched off and all electronic devices switched to silent. We've got 1 hour for this hearing. So just to start with introductions, I'm Deputy Helen Miles and I'm Chair of the panel.
I'm Deputy Catherine Curtis, I'm the Vice Chair of the panel.
And yourself, Mr. Trevor.
I'm Edward Trevor and I used to be Chairman of St Helier and also the Island Committee at one time.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'd like to thank you very much for the submission that you made about the rates to the panel. And the purpose of today is really for you to talk to us a little bit more. So we have a series of questions, but they are at quite a high level. I have not a rates assessor, so I know very little about the rate system, but my colleague here, Deputy Curtis,
knows a little bit.
has been a rates assessor before, so we've got a nice balance of questions between us. So really, I think the first question for you, Mr. Trevor, in your submission, you described the current parish rate system as broken and at risk of collapse. So can you explain to us a little bit about why you believe that to be the case?
Yes, I can. There are 12 parishes. Each parish has its own way of doing things. St Brelard, for instance, uses a system of points. Most of the other parishes have grids. This is for domestic property only. The grids are different for each parish. It's well known that Gruville had nothing and stuck a finger in the air. I believe now they do have a grid which may be similar to St Martin, I believe. Even in St Helier, assessments in different Vantains are different because it was told to me that when the new system came in 2003, there were 4 committees of 3 people each in St Helier. They didn't agree with each other and they put different assessments on similar types of property. What also happened is that over the years, things have varied very considerably. The problem with the island is that we have a minimum of 62 assessors covering very few properties, essentially. As far as I'm aware now, there is not one assessor who has any idea of valuing property. The assessments are based on the 2000 to 2002 rental values, and that covers domestic and non-domestic properties. When it comes to non-domestic properties, they are quite complicated, as the Vice Chairman knows. You can't have a grid. Although the new assessors in St Helier have asked for one, it isn't practical or possible because there are so many different types of property. There are shops, there are offices, there are warehouses, there's an abattoir, there's the port, and so on and so forth. And nobody knows how to value them. The new government building, for instance.
Because you highlighted concerns in your submission about the qualifications of assessors. What model do you think should be introduced to improve matters?
What I think should be done is that there should be employed a professional who could oversee and do the valuations. My suggestion is that there should be an island panel of 9 people who would be under the control of the constables as a supervisory committee, because otherwise the constables would not be happy. There should be 3 from St Helier and 6 from the other parishes. And I put it that way because St Helier has roughly a third of the value of quarters on the island. And St Helier is complicated for the reasons I gave before.
Yeah, Just add in, just thinking about what you were saying, I remember that we used to go out to look at new properties or office type developments and so on. And there wasn't, this depended on your knowledge really, there wasn't that structure there of information to draw on for the non-domestic properties, was there?
And no, there can't be, because shops, if they're in King and Queen Street, are zoned, which I think I explained at the time how
Yeah.
to zone. In other places, it's overall. Different types of property are valued in different ways. This is one of the problems. And unless a person is qualified, it's extremely difficult to explain to them each type and how it's done, as you've well found out.
Yeah.
Do you think that when you talk about a qualified person, do you talk about one person, so a particular role, and would that person be appointed by the government, for example, or would they be appointed by the Comité de Connétable?
I suspect it will be the Connétable, because it is always said, rightly or wrongly, the central government does something, it expands and gets more and more expensive. So I would suggest and recommend it would be the Connétable.
Connétable would do it, but it would be a paid post.
That would be my view.
Okay, thank
The
you.
problem with the present system is that, if you exclude St Helier for a moment, the parishes each elect for 3-year terms 5 assessors. Anybody can apply. I said exclude St Helier. They have to have between 7 and 12. Anyone can apply, regardless of their knowledge. And to give an example, years ago, a person who was looking after car parks for the harbours, making sure the right people parked, applied, then said that they worked from 9 to 5, so we should start at 6 o'clock in the evening. Well, and they never turned up because they couldn't. You cannot work only in the evenings because the shops and offices aren't open, and you have to visit properties. Although I'm told the present committee in St Helier don't go out and look. To give an example of what we'll need doing, in my view, is Photo Sound have moved into the shop next door to Voisin. There should be a new assessment on Voisin, including Photo Sound, because they either have or are knocking holes in the wall to join the two together so that you can move from one to the other. My suspicion is that they won't, because they won't know how to do it.
And whose responsibility would it be to highlight those sorts of issues? Would that be the chair of the rates committee?
The chair of the
St Helier Parish Rates Committee.
Yes, the parish rates committee chairman should, in fact, check this sort of thing. What a parish assessment committee is supposed to do is to keep an eye on the parish and see when things are happening. You don't only rely upon the rates form that is sent out at the beginning of the year.
Okay. And who is responsible for oversight of the work of the rates committee?
Nobody. They are independent.
Okay. So
And if I may add, having said that they are independent, it has always been my view that if you are a rates assessor, you shouldn't, in fact, be on the accounts committee, because the public might think, if an assessment is increased, that you are increasing it in order to raise the number of quarters in the parish.
okay.
So I firmly always said but it wasn't always accepted, that you should not be on the accounts committee if you are an assessor.
Assessor. And when, you may not know this is a parish issue, but when, are the rates assessors posts advertised? How are they recruited, the rates assessors?
To the best of my knowledge, in St Helier, it's certainly word of mouth, or the constable saying to somebody, why not be a rates assessor?
It might maybe on the website as well, I think.
And,
On the parish website, I think, as well, possibly.
and is there a job specification and a description of the role?
There wasn't when I was an assessor, which finished 2 years ago.
So when people are applying to be rates assessors, there's no clarity about actually what it means to be a rates assessor.
Well, what I did in St Helier was interview people,
Yeah.
Okay.
as your deputy chairman will know,
Yeah.
and explain to them what was involved.
Okay.
Whether that happens or not in other parishes, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was a good explanation, but like you say, maybe it's not happening elsewhere.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
So if somebody came forward as a rates assessor who you interviewed that you didn't consider to be suitable because you didn't feel they had the necessary knowledge, skills and experience, would you be able to veto that appointment?
No, but I would try and put them off.
Okay, thank you. The Comité de Connotar published some new guidelines. Actually, it wasn't the Comité, it was the Rates Assessment Committee in June, setting out how and when and by whom assessments are made to ensure a consistent approach across all the parishes. And I was just wondering if you'd had sight of that assessment guide at all?
No.
No. Okay. It has been published. But okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So now I just have some questions about public understanding of the rates system. So in your view, how well does the public understand the parish rates system, including the terminology used?
The public doesn't understand it, and nor do the surveyors, assessors, estate agents on the island.
Yeah.
Virtually nobody understands it. People don't understand what quarters are. People don't understand what attributes are.
And why do you think that is?
Partly because the amount of rates people pay in Jersey is very low. When there was a working party from the Treasury Department, probably 5 or 6 years ago, I can't remember the date, the average for domestic payment per annum was £358. I suspect it's probably gone up to 370, 380. A band D in the UK, which is the average, is about 2,000 to 2,200. And give an example of the amount of rates that is paid being so low here, and I think it's good it's low, is that a company rang to ask how much they would have to pay and if they could pay monthly. For some reason, the office put it through to me. It wasn't a question an assessor should have answered, but I did. And it was 7,400. And the lady said to me, that's a month. And I said, no, that's for the year. Oh, she said, we're paid all in once.
So do you think that's a reason for like people are not, or companies are not motivated to find out more about the process because they hardly notice it sometimes?
It's so low that people aren't particularly concerned. And of course, where, as I said, it was 358, that is the two parts of the assessment, because you have the owner and you have the occupier.
Yeah.
And in many cases, each pays separately, which is uneconomic.
Uneconomic in what way? In terms of collection?
Yes.
Okay.
If you take somebody paying, not all of them are uneconomic, If you take somebody with a garage and an assessment on that garage, the assessment could be, and in many cases is, 1,000 quarters. At 2.5p, well, it's 5p, the two roughly, you're collecting whatever, it's about £25. So you're collecting £12.50 from the occupier and £12.50 from the owner. The cost of collection is greater than that. And if the people don't pay and have to have a reminder, it's even higher. And if they have to be chased after a reminder, it's even higher. So my recommendation is that it should just be one figure
For the property.
for the property. And it should, as the Deputy Chairman I think is aware, people with a 9-year lease pay both. Owner-occupiers pay both. Shared transfer, the administrator pays both. Now, we changed that 10 years ago or whatever. So why shouldn't it apply in all cases?
If that were to happen, presumably landlords would still want their tenants to pay what they're used to them paying, rather than the landlord having to pay it all themselves. They would have to make some agreement privately
Yes.
in the lease. So it would still be collected as one amount rather than split into occupier. Yeah, okay.
That's
I
correct.
see what you mean. Also, just going back to what you were saying about on the commercial properties and the business person thinking that they might, it might be 7,000 a month or whatever they have to pay. So do you think that generally a lot of the commercial rates are too low, the non-domestic amounts are too low?
What one has to remember in Jersey, which is totally different to the UK, is that the amount of rates charged and collected is determined by the amount each parish needs to have in order to run the parish, and that has to be approved by a parish assembly. So it doesn't matter what the levels are as far as the amount of money is collected, because if the parish needs £122 a year, in a year, that is all it can collect.
I'm just trying to think of the part of the island-wide rate as well, and how something like that would be restricted to. Sorry, I'm just thinking it through at the moment.
The island-wide rate was set some years ago and normally goes up by the rate of inflation. There was one, or there were 2 years perhaps, when it was frozen.
Yeah,
I think it was 1 year, but I can't remember.
the cost of living.
And it was frozen because of the pandemic, I think. That could be changed by, I presume, the states. I'm not sure. But the constables look at that every year.
Yeah, okay. So just quickly coming back to the public understanding, do you think there is anything that could be done to make it more transparent and clearer for those ratepayers who might want to understand more?
Yes, I think there is.
Yeah.
I think we should get rid of quarters, which were brought in to try and differentiate between the law prior to the change in 2003 and after it.
Yeah.
I think it should be shown as pounds.
Yeah, because nobody understands the term.
Nobody understands quarters.
No.
So I think it should be pounds. So that an assessment, if it were to be assessed, a single bedroom flat, for instance, would have an assessment of between 11 and 15,000, depending on the flat in general, rather than at the moment, they're about 5,800 from memory,
Right.
on average. It's totally out of kilter with current day figures. But so a person doesn't understand what 5,800 is. They would understand what 11, 12, 13,000 was. And they could then look at their rent and see if the assessment corresponded with it. And because the parishes may only collect the money they need, which would be exactly the same as before, the poundage would be reduced. People would still pay the same, but instead of it being 1.3 pence or whatever it may be today, it would come down to 0.6 or whatever.
Yeah, and there isn't really any reason why it shouldn't be done, is there? You know, instead of quarters, having it as pounds, I don't think.
There is no reason, in my view, that it shouldn't be done, because rates are a tax, and all taxes should be fair, and the current system is not fair.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, if there were a reassessment, a revaluation, my view is, as I think I said, the government or whoever should change the law so that the parishes could, if they wished, have a domestic and a non-domestic rate. And I say that because domestic rents have increased substantially more than almost all commercial rents.
Yeah.
And if there were only one rate still, it would mean domestic payments would be much higher than now, and commercial ones would be less. We already have, on the island-wide rate, 2 levels, so there is no reason why the parishes shouldn't. I suspect that a place like St. Warren would only need one, because they consist of 6,000 fields, 2 or 3 houses, and maybe a shop, and that's it. I mean, obviously that's an exaggeration, but it's to give the idea. Whereas in St. Helier, for instance, it has about 70% of the non-domestic quarters, and if I remember, and I'm going back 2 or 3 years when I did it, about 40% of the domestic. Now that will have changed slightly because there's been a lot of building of domestic, and they've replaced very often hotels and so on, which are non-domestic. So I don't know what the figures are now because I don't have access to the rates management system anymore. So I can't look up the figures.
If St Helier was to have those 2 different rates for domestic and non-domestic, for them to get the same amount of revenue in, the domestic rates would have to go up quite a lot then, wouldn't they, I suppose? If the non-domestic ones were more reasonable.
If it happened in St Helier, the poundage, I'll call it, would go down substantially for
because of all the
domestic,
yeah,
and would go up for non-domestic in order to get the same amount of money as before. And the way that it could be calculated to get the differential rate in the pound, or the rate it's called, would be what we did on hotels, guest houses and lodging houses, which hadn't been reassessed for 2003. They'd just all been left as they were before, and they were totally out of kilter, and the pubs. We added all the hotels together and got a figure, whatever it might have been, and then reassessed so that the hotels, for instance, had what we thought were correct assessments, but the total number of quarters came to roughly the same as before. Now, this meant that some went up a lot, some went down, some stayed the same. And in all cases, the bodies like the Hospitality Association and the Lodging House Association told their members to appeal regardless, and not one did in any case. And Anne Hotelier came in, who owned an hotel and was taking over another one, or had taken over another one, came in, and the other one had doubled, and I expected him to create merry hell. He came in and said, "I'm glad you've done that, because such and such hotel is now similar to mine, and that's correct. They were wrong before."
Yes.
It's about that perception of fairness. It's procedural justice, isn't it?
Yes.
People,
Assessors have
if
to be...
people understand if the processes and the procedures are fair, they're more likely to abide by them and be happy with them.
If you can show they are fair, yes. I was an assessor in St Helier for 17 years. Because I moved to St Saviour, I was told that I couldn't do my last year of that 3-year term. And that was confirmed by the Attorney General's office, so I had to give up. In that 17 years, there was not one appeal.
Yeah. Actually, that's what I'm about to ask more questions on right now, the appeals process. So you propose separating advisory roles from appeals committees. So why do you see that as necessary?
The present system is that if a person wants to appeal, they have to appeal to the assessment committee itself, where 3 members of the assessment committee sit in judgment. One puts the assessor's case. So it's the body setting the assessment,
Knocking their own homework.
having to decide whether it's right or wrong.
Yes.
After that, if the person is dissatisfied, as they might well be, it can go to the Rates Appeal Board. Now, the system that we used in St Helier was to, if a person didn't like their assessment, was to ask them if they'd like to come in and have an informal discussion. We were always able to prove that it had been done fairly, and they had an assessment that was fair, but told them that they could appeal, and we told them the way in which it could be done. So I said nobody ever appealed beyond the Parish Assessment Committee.
Okay, so ideally then people come in, have a chat about things. After that, if they're still not satisfied, what mechanisms do you think should exist that would be best for them to...
There should be an independent appeals committee.
Right, okay.
And who should, when you say independent, who should sit on that sort of committee? People with no rates experience, or?
I would suggest people who have rates experience. On any semi-legal system, you have to be fair. And if I can go back to my time in the UK, I used to be on an appeal committee which covered 9 London boroughs. And we used to sit, I was a chairman, and 3 used to sit and hear the appeals. The other 2 might not have been qualified as I was. I'm Chartered Surveyor, as I put in my thing. The others might well have not been, but we had to deal with it as if it were a court of law, and we were the lowest level of law of possible, and the appeals were to the courts, if necessary, and it's very, very rare. It's called the Lands Tribunal. I think we should have a system here where people can appeal to an independent body, and they should have some knowledge of property or finance or the law,
Okay, thank you.
would be my view.
And should the recommendations, if an independent committee was established, should the committee be able to make recommendations for, say, a reduction or an increase in rates? Should that automatically be enforceable by the parishes?
Yes, if you've got an appeals committee and they say it should go down, then the parish would have to put it down.
Would have to put it down.
Have to.
Okay, and is that the case at the moment?
Yes.
The parish can't choose.
No.
Okay, thank you. You've talked a lot about the improvements that you would suggest to strengthen the rates system and its administration. Which improvement do you think is the most important?
There are two. The first one is a revaluation of all properties
Island-wide.
island-wide. The second one is for the officials in the parishes to be properly trained and to have it as their job. To give an example of some years ago, a parish secretary rang me and said, do we have a rate where people have to pay when the property's empty, or do they not pay? Well, a parish secretary should know. I mean, the answer is that the owner pays regardless of whether the property is occupied or not. Well, he was a long-standing parish secretary and didn't know a simple thing like that, which to me was amazing.
Yeah.
You talked about a full professional re-evaluation
Yes.
of all properties.
Yes.
I think you've suggested that should be done every 10 years.
Well, if you go around the world, the UK is currently 5. Lots of countries are 3. At one time, the UK was going to come down to 3. I don't think it has yet. And I don't know if they're going to do it, but they were talking about it. I suggested 10 years in Jersey because I think the changes that are likely to take place are over that sort of period, and to do it every 5 years, especially when most of the people are still presumably going to be volunteers, is too much work.
Okay. And that re-evaluation would be done on a parish basis?
No, I think it should be done overall each time.
It should on an island-wide
On
basis
island-wide.
each time.
As soon as you say it should be done on a parish basis, you're going to get 12 sets of how they do it, 12 different levels, and it doesn't work. And I think if we come back to telling people that it's assessed at so many pounds, they will understand it. If you tell them that it depends on the number of bedrooms, which is the way it's done at the moment, generally, and a standard one is 2 bedrooms, 1 reception room, a kitchen, bathroom, or an open plan, and that the assessment is going to be so many pounds. They know if they've got 5 bedrooms, it's going to be so many extra pounds, and you can explain it to them. And to give you an example of years ago, when the Royal Yacht was rebuilt, the assessment was vastly changed. I don't remember the figures either then or now, to be honest. But the current leader of the States, Chief Minister, came and saw me and asked me if he could discuss the assessment. So I gave him a typed valuation of the way in which it had been worked out, to which he replied, "Oh, I've never seen anything like this before in any other property." So I said, well, we do it for all properties. And he then said, could he have a reduction? To which my answer was, well, some of the rooms are conference rooms and they're not therefore like offices occupied all the time. So ask me if you can have a reduction of 15%, I think it was, might have been 20, on that part of the building. To which he replied, can I ask you that? To which I replied, yes, ask me, which he did. So I reduced the conference areas.
Broomville, but it's very difficult for the public to find out that information. And what would you recommend in terms of the government being more, the parishes being more transparent about their rates assessments?
Yes, you've mentioned two things. Firstly, the assessment, and secondly, how much they pay. And they are different. The assessments, according to the law and in common sense, for similar properties should be the same regardless of where they are on the island and in which parish they might be. How much they pay depends on what the parish decides it wants to spend.
Yeah.
So a standard 3-bedroom detached house in one parish could well pay a lot more or a lot less than a similar house in another parish, because parish A might decide that it wants to spend a lot more than parish B does. And so the two things are different.
In terms of the, you talk about the assessment of the property, what are your views on paying more for a sea view as opposed to a country view, for example?
That is what they call an attribute.
Yes.
Now, my view is that people pay a lot more for a sea view in rent, therefore the assessment should be higher. Some people like a country view, so again, you might have a slightly higher rent, which would be an assessment on a country view. But if you're in town with a town view, you would not like it, so you'd be paying slightly less rent, therefore the assessment should be lower. And to give an example, if you take the flats called Horizon, my last year as an assessor, those flats were being built, and I was asked if I could give an assessment of what the, oh sorry, if you can use the word again, of the assessments for the flats. And on the grid, which I think I've supplied, the normal flats were C, because that's what we put all new flats at and we agreed would be C. But the ones with a sea view, I recommended D. Now, they weren't completed till after I had finished. And I can't tell you whether the new people used the figures I had suggested, but that was the way I did it. So the town view was C and the sea view was D. And that's how we did it. Now, I am told that the committee decided after I'd gone with new, and it was all new people, that new flats and houses should be based on D rather than C because they were new, which went against what the appeals committee had said in another parish. But
Right.
because the differences are relatively low, or are very low, nobody's appealed. But they would have won if they had.
So that will continue with them being on
They've put D on. We used to
and they
put
won't be new anymore.
Sorry?
They won't be new anymore, will they? And they'll still be on that different
Exactly, and that's why the
category.
appeals committee said you shouldn't put them up because you're forever doing it otherwise.
Yeah,
But
understand.
as you're well aware, as an assessor, we used to put C on all the new ones.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you have any more questions?
Yes, I just wanted to ask a bit more about how this re-evaluation process might work. So if it's an all island, all properties all over the islands, do you think that would need to have a special team come to do the work, or would the rates assessors themselves be doing a lot of the work, or what do you think?
Because as far as I'm aware, there is no qualified assessor anymore, and no constable has ever been a rates assessor, whereas in the past they were. And I was asked when I became an assessor and chairman of the committee whether I was going to stand as constable next. And I said, no, I wasn't. But my predecessor as chairman of the island was now the late Sylvia Yates.
Yes.
I took over from him. And whilst I was there, again, the late Peter Hanning of St Saviour, they were two constables who had been rates assessors, and I was told that it was often the case that the person who led, because at one time there was no chairman, became constable, which they asked me if I was going to do it, because I said absolutely not. I was only there to do rates.
Yeah. So without that knowledge in the constables, among the constables,
The constables,
would it have to be a special professional?
they have no idea at all.
Yeah.
They're like the public. They just don't know. They know the money's collected, and that's about it. The problem that we've got is that the Secretariat of the Constables doesn't want any change at all. Mm-hmm. And she tells them that they must have no change, and they just follow because they don't understand it. She is an expert on the law and understands the law more than anybody else, but hasn't the first idea on how to assess a property.
Okay.
This is what concerns me. And if we're looking at fairness, how can the Secretariat of the Constables, or the Supervisory Committee, which is the same, also be Secretary to the Rates Appeal Board?
Right.
That again, I think, leads to it being suspected that there's unfairness. I'm not saying there is,
Yeah.
because I don't know, but you have to appear to the public to be totally independent. And in my view, that isn't shown.
Okay. Right, I think that's...
Is there anything else you want to tell us in relation to parish rates or parish matters more widely today?
Yes, I was told I could. I think. I think I had a note saying that if I wanted to, I could. Yes, a small number of things. Firstly, I think that there are many jobs that the parishes do that should be done by parish A. For instance, blue badges are currently only issued through St Helier, which is fine. Driving licences are issued through more than one parish. Dog licences are parish specific. Why? Why shouldn't parish A do dog licences, parish B do driving licences, parish and so on? It would be more economical, it'd be more sensible, and people would understand what they were doing. So I think that those should be done. I also think it's totally stupid that in most parishes, the rubbish collection is done by the parish or the states, depending. In some cases, they've merged. Why isn't there one system for the whole island? It would be cheaper if all the rubbish collection was done on an island basis, so it didn't have to keep within the parish, and where it was sensible, they would go outside the parish.
We've been
We've been asking
about
questions.
that, yeah.
Sorry?
We've been asking questions of the infrastructure minister and the parishes about that. There will be
Yeah.
a section in our report about refuse and recycling.
Okay, recycling, why isn't it the same all over the island?
Yeah.
It's stupid. There are many things. They can still be controlled by the constables if that's what they want, but they should be island-wide. And if each parish had a specific thing in which it was expert, it would be done better,
Yeah.
rather than a small number of employees in some of the parishes having to scatter what they do.
Yeah.
And also, I'm not saying where, obviously, a parish secretary told me that they were bored at times because there was so little to do for them in a country parish.
Okay.
I think that was all. It was just to give a general idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're looking, as I say, we're looking particularly at the
Yeah.
refuse.
I have, in confidence to your clerk, given the names of 2 parish officials, the only 2 on the island, I think, who know rates, and it might be worth talking
Speaking to them.
to them.
That'd be good.
But
Okay.
Yeah.
it would have to be confidential.
Yeah, of course, understand that. Okay, on that note, thank you very much. That's been about 50 minutes. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Okay?
As I say, there will be a transcript prepared of the hearing, which will be published and put onto the States of Jersey website. And we will be publishing our report in due course. So thank you very much for attending.